Somewhere far from here, a great pale world turns in silence, wrapped in bands of soft weather and a wide, patient ring of ice. Imagine drifting near it. Imagine the long, slow curve of shadow, the quiet chime of small stones against a hull, the light of a distant sun falling gently across everything. Let your breathing slow. Let the world grow larger, calmer, further away. Rest here for a while. The buoy tender Cassiel drift turned slowly above the gas giant Aurum, held in a long polar orbit as quiet and deliberate as the turning of a tide. From the forward viewport, the rings filled everything. They stretched from one edge of the glass to the other, a frozen river of pale light suspended across the dark. And if you watched them long enough, you could see the individual particle streams shifting within, translucent curtains of ice and dust moving in their ancient, patient way, catching the distant sun at angles that made them shimmer faintly, like breath on cold air. The ship was very small against all of this. Inside, in the low hum of the night cycle, the acoustic technician, Marin, sat at his listening console and did very little. The console glowed a soft green, the color of shallow water, and across his screen, a single waveform scrolled in slow, unhurried peaks and valleys. He was not adjusting anything. He was not writing anything down. He was simply watching the waveform move, the way you might watch a candle flame or a river, with that particular quality of attention that is not quite thinking, not quite dreaming, but something gentle and wordless that lives in the space between the two. His breathing was slow and even. He reached forward and keyed the calibration sequence, a habit so practiced that his fingers moved almost without him, finding the familiar controls the way a hand finds a banister in a dark hallway. One by one, in order, each buoy received its ping and answered. Buoy 1. A soft chime in the headset, and then the sound opened around him like a room. It was the ring noise, the sound that was not quite a sound. The long, patient murmur of ice grains drifting against one another at the edge of audibility. The instruments translated it into something the human ear could hold, and what they gave him was something between rain on a distant roof and the interior hush of a seashell, that round oceanic stillness that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Buoy 2 answered, the same sound, and yet not quite. A slightly different texture, a different depth, as though the ice in that part of the orbital lane was a little finer, a little older. He worked through the sequence slowly, buoy by buoy, each one checking in with its quiet chime and then offering up its portion of the ring. His breathing matched the rhythm of it without him choosing to make it so. By buoy 7, his shoulders had dropped, just slightly, the last of the day's tension releasing into the low green light. Buoy 7's chime faded a little more slowly than the others, as though it had more to say. He tilted his head and listened. The ring noise was there, the same soft mineral murmur, ice against ice, patient and ancient, but underneath it, the particle strike counter was ticking out something he had not heard before. He watched the readout. 3 small impacts, close together, a breath of silence, then 5, arriving in that same unhurried cluster, then another pause, and then 7. He let the sequence complete and sat with it for a moment, the numbers settling into him the way a musical phrase settles, repeating itself quietly in the mind long after the instrument has gone still. He ran the calibration again, his fingers moving through the steps without any urgency, simply checking. The result came back the same. 3, 5, 7. The ice out there in that arc of the orbital lane was falling against something, or through something, in a rhythm that the rings themselves had arranged, over what might have been centuries, over what might have been longer. He noted it in the log with a few unhurried keystrokes, flagged the sector, and let it rest. The green light held steady around him. Buoy 8 was waiting, patient as everything else out here. He pulled up the historical record for Buoy 7's sector with a quiet tap, and the data scrolled back through the weeks in pale amber columns. Each line a small patient archive of something the ring had done while no one was particularly watching. Most of it was familiar, the usual drift and scatter, numbers that meant ice doing what ice had always done out here, following the slow geometry of the orbital lane without any intention behind it. He let his eyes move down the record without hurrying. The 3 and the 5 and the 7 were there again tonight, exactly as he had heard them. But further back, softer, spread across shifts the way a word is sometimes spread across a long exhale, he found the others. A pair of strikes on a night 6 weeks ago, and then 3 on a different watch, and then 5, and then 7, each grouping separated by days, each one so quiet and so spaced apart that any one of them alone would have looked like ordinary resonance noise, which was exactly what he had marked them as at the time. He sat back in his chair. 2, 3, 5, 7. He did not reach for anything. He did not speak. The green light lay softly across his hands, and the ring turned outside the glass. Unhurried and immense, and he was very still. He left the console quietly, pushing up from the chair with no particular haste, and made his way forward through the narrow corridor to the observation bubble. It was a small space, barely wider than his shoulders, a blister of clear composite that curved out from the ship's nose like a held breath. And when he settled into it and let his eyes adjust, the rings were no longer an abstraction on a screen. They were everywhere. Below him, above him, angled across his whole field of view, not the flat disk that diagrams always showed, but something far stranger and more alive. A vast, slow architecture of light and shadow that had no edges he could find. Brighter lanes of ice caught the distant sun and held it for a moment before drifting on. Darker gaps breathed between them. Everything moved in the same patient orbital direction, but not quite together, each lane keeping its own unhurried pace, so that over the hours the whole great structure shifted against itself in a way that was almost like breathing. He pressed one hand gently to the composite and looked out into it. Billions of separate pieces of ice, each one moving alone, each one following its own quiet arc through the dark. And somewhere among them, a pattern, patient and deliberate, tapping softly at the edge of knowing. He did not feel afraid, he felt very small, and somehow gently looked after. He made his way back to the console without hurrying, settled into the chair, and pulled up the sequence again. 2, 3, 5, 7. The next prime was 11. He sat with that for a moment, turning it over quietly in his mind, and then reached across and adjusted Buoy 7's recording sensitivity, nudging the resolution higher, letting it listen more carefully for whatever might be coming. It was a small thing to do. It felt like the right thing. He made himself a drink after that, something warm and plain, and carried it back to the chair and held it in both hands while the waveform of ring noise rolled slowly across the lower half of his screen. The sound of it, rendered into something visible, was gentle and irregular. A soft breathing, no two waves quite the same. Aurum filled the lower corner of the forward port, its cloud bands the color of old amber and pale rust, moving so slowly that you had to watch for a long time before the motion became real to you. He thought about the rings. Nobody agreed how old they were. The estimates ran to hundreds of millions of years. He did a quiet calculation in his head and then checked it on the screen. If the spacing held, 11 should arrive somewhere near the end of his shift. About 2 hours. He settled back and waited without urgency and drank his plain warm drink. An hour and 40 minutes later, Buoy 7 registered 11 groups, clean and evenly spaced, and then the sector went quiet. Just like that. The background percussion of the rings returned, ordinary and unhurried, as though nothing had been said. Martin sat with it for a moment before he moved. Then he opened the acoustic log and began to write, slowly and with care, choosing each word the way you might choose a stone to set down gently. He wrote the sequence. He wrote the timing, the intervals between each group, the way the last one faded back into the general noise, without any abruptness, without ceremony. He wrote that it had stopped. He did not write what he thought it meant. That was not his place, and he was not sure he had the right words for it anyway. He noted, at the end, that the Buoy network had only been in place for 6 weeks. He noted that whatever had produced the sequence might have been producing it before that, in the empty time before anyone was listening, before anyone had thought to place an ear against the cold and patient ice. It might have been going on for years. It might have been going on for longer than that. He saved the file and marked it for the science relay, and then he sat back in the green quiet and breathed. He dimmed the console to its lowest setting, and the cabin fell into a greenish dark, the kind of dark that felt inhabited rather than empty. Above him, through the forward port, the rings filled most of the sky, pale and broad and slow, catching the distant sun at angles that made certain bands glow faintly, while others receded into something almost gray. He sat with his hands loose in his lap and thought about the sequence, whether it had stopped or was simply resting, whether a thing that old and that large could be said to rest at all. He thought about how the rings had no way of knowing that there was someone on the other side of the glass, listening with instruments and notebooks and warm drinks gone cold. Or perhaps they did know, in whatever way a planetary ring could be said to know anything, which was perhaps a different kind of knowing altogether, patient and mineral and without urgency. The rings would still be turning when he woke. They would be turning when the station was eventually decommissioned and towed somewhere quieter. They would still be making their slow, fine arithmetic of collision and drift long after anyone had forgotten the name of this watch or the man who had kept it. He found that restful. He closed his eyes before he quite decided to, and the rings kept their count outside the glass, unhurried and immeasurably kind. The resonance pod hangs motionless inside the B-ring, suspended between two slow curtains of ice and silicate dust that drift past the curved hull like falling snow in slow motion. Through the forward port, the gas giant fills the entire lower sky, its amber and ivory bands pulling the eye downward into impossible depth. The rings stretch away in both directions, paper thin from above, but here from inside. They are a world of their own, a pale cathedral of floating debris lit from below by reflected planetary light. Martin sits at his console in near silence, calibrating the hydrophone array that extends from the pod on long, articulated arms, each sensor cup pointed outward into the ring, like an ear pressed to a wall. The instruments are patient things, and he has learned to be patient alongside them. He makes a small adjustment to the gain on the third array, watches the readout settle, and then leans back in his chair with the particular ease of a man who has nowhere else to be. The cabin is warm and very quiet. A low hum moves through the hull, less a sound than a feeling, the faint resonance of the pod holding its position against the slow gravitational breathing of the planet below. Fragments of ice drift past the port glass, some no larger than his thumbnail, catching the amber light and releasing it again as they turn. He watches them without urgency. Outside, the ring goes on forever in both directions, ancient and unhurried, full of small, cold light. He reaches forward and initiates the calibration sequence with 2 quiet keystrokes, and the array comes alive in a way he can feel. More than hear, a slow pulse moving outward from each sensor cup like a breath released into still water. The console registers the transmission, and he watches the waveform scroll across the lower display, smooth and unhurried, carrying his small signal out into the ring. The returns begin almost immediately. The readout blooms with scatter, 1,000 overlapping echoes arriving from every direction at once, each fragment of ice and silicate dust sending back its own faint reply. He has seen this pattern many times and finds it beautiful in the way that weather's beautiful, complex and alive and entirely indifferent to being watched. He lifts the headset from the console edge and settles it over his ears with the careful attention of someone placing something delicate, and then he closes his eyes. The sound that fills him is immense and very soft. It is something like wind moving through a room that has no walls, or like rain falling on a surface too vast to hold a single point of focus. Every frequency arrives blurred and layered, a slow turning choir of collisions too gentle to be called collisions, each one a grain of ancient ice grazing another in the dark. He opens his log and types a short entry. Local particle density consistent with prior session. Array nominal. Passive phase beginning now. Then he sets the timer for 6 hours, folds his hands in his lap, and listens. 2 hours in, the noise floor drops. It happens sometimes, a local density wave moving through the ring like a slow exhalation, pushing the debris aside, opening a brief corridor of relative quiet in the scatter. Marin has heard it before. He knows the way the headset goes, suddenly wide and airy. The way the returns thin and separate, and the hiss beneath everything softens to almost nothing. He waits for the corridor to close again, for the choir to resume its patient layering. It does not close. The quiet deepens instead, settling around him, like something being carefully set down. And in the quiet there is something else. He does not move at first. He only listens. The way you listen when you are not certain you have heard what you think you heard, when you want to give the sound every chance to resolve itself into something ordinary. But it does not resolve. It continues, patient and unhurried, arriving in the same loose shape each time. A long silence, then several returns clustered softly together, then the long silence again. Not identical each time, slightly different in duration, in the spacing between the cluster's inner notes, but recognizably, persistently the same shape. He reaches for the console and pulls the playback into quarter speed. The intervals stretch and open like a piece of music heard from the next room, and in that slowed unfolding, the pattern becomes undeniable, quiet and round-edged and returning, the way a familiar phrase returns. He works slowly, unhurried, the way the ring itself seems unhurried, moving its ancient inventory around the giant on a schedule measured in years and centuries. The array arms stretch out from the pod in 4 directions, each one a filament of receivers 100 meters long, and by comparing the tiny differences in when each arm catches a return, he can triangulate loosely the way you might locate a sound in a dark room by turning your head until it sits most fully in both ears. The arc resolves gradually, the way a shoreline emerges from morning fog, not all at once but piece by piece, one landmark at a time. 400 kilometers of ring material, a loose congregation of ice and silicate somewhere in the middle distance, neither a dense clump nor a gap, but a kind of threshold, a zone where the debris is arranged at a particular spacing that makes it capable of this, of gathering the ambient acoustic scatter of the ring and sorting it, moment by moment, into something with a shape. He adjusts the pod with a single gentle thruster pulse, a nudge so small he barely feels it, just enough to keep the arc centered in the array as the giant's gravity draws him slowly forward along his orbit. The pattern continues through the third hour and into the fourth. The gas giant's cloud bands slide past below him in their endless, unhurried procession, ochre and cream and a pale, distant amber, and the signal moves with him, patient, keeping pace, still speaking in its soft, unresolved language to anyone willing to sit quietly enough to hear it. At the fourth hour, Marin has a hypothesis, and it settles over him the way a good hypothesis always does, not as a sudden, bright thing, but as a slow recognition, a sense that the shape was already there, and he has simply turned to face it. The ring here is unusually rich in large aggregate bodies. He has noted them in the survey logs. Loose rubble piles held together by their own faint gravity, each one a slow and private world, tumbling on its own axis at its own unhurried rate. Individually, they are unremarkable. Individually, they are just debris, just the ordinary, ancient wreckage of a solar system going about its business. But Marin looks out at the long middle distance where the ice and silicate hang in their loose congregation, and he begins to see them differently. Each rubble pile, as it rotates, disturbs the smaller particles moving past it. A nudge here, a deflection there, a tiny pressure wave propagating outward through the ring material at speeds too slow to feel, but not too slow to measure. One body doing this is noise. One body doing this is simply physics. But 10,000 bodies doing this simultaneously, each at a slightly different rate, each contributing its own small interval to the larger whole, and the mathematics of interference begins to take over. Certain frequencies reinforce each other. Others cancel and disappear. The ring filters itself, quietly and without intention, and what emerges on the other side is this, something that sounds to a patient human ear like a melody. He wonders if anyone else has ever heard it. Not the signal, not this particular recording, but the thing underneath, the ring's own slow arithmetic working itself out across the centuries. Some survey drone may have passed through here decades ago, its instruments dutifully logging frequencies it had no instruction to find beautiful, and moved on. The data sitting somewhere in an archive, unsearched, uncatalogued, patient as the ring itself. The amber light crosses the far wall of the pod, and Marin watches it without moving. His coffee has gone cold in its sealed cup. He does not mind. There is something right about sitting still in a cooling cabin while something ancient and unhurried plays itself out in his ears. It feels like the appropriate posture. It feels like what the moment asks of him. He thinks about the rubble piles out there in the long dark, each one tumbling on its private axis, each one wholly indifferent to the pattern it is helping to weave. No intention, no awareness, just mass and momentum in the slow, reliable pressure of gravity doing what gravity has always done, and out of that, without anyone meaning to, something that moves through him the way certain pieces of music do, settling into the spaces between his thoughts and simply resting there. The playback reaches its third hour. Outside, the ring turns. The planet breathes its slow light across everything. Marin closes his eyes a little more and listens. When the dive clock reaches 6 hours, Marin begins the slow ascent. He tips the pod's nose upward by a fraction of a degree, and the thrusters offer the gentlest possible correction, and the debris begins to thin around him the way fog thins when you climb above it, gradually, then all at once. The smaller particles catch the distant sunlight as they fall away below him, each one briefly lit, briefly gone, and then the pod breaks through the upper surface of the ring into open space, and everything becomes still and wide and very quiet. Below him, the rings are flat and geometric and immense, their shadow drawn in a long, clean line across the face of the planet. The giant turns in its patient way. 4 billion years of turning, 4 billion years of the rings combing themselves into their bands and gaps, and all of it continuing now exactly as it was before he arrived, and exactly as it will continue long after the pod and the station and every record he has ever filed have dissolved back into the elements they came from. He opens the report screen and writes in the unhurried language of someone who has been given something he did not expect to receive. He does not call it a discovery, he calls it a conversation he was not expecting to be included in, and adds simply that he is grateful for it. Then he dims the console, sets the autopilot toward the station beacon, and lets the recorded sound continue softly in his ears. The window curves around him like a held breath, and beyond it, the gas giant turns in slow amber, filling the whole of the down. Its face is not one color, but many, soft, banded creams and ochres and honeyed browns, each band drifting at its own patient speed, the way rivers of different depths run beside each other without ever mixing. The rings arc overhead in pale parallel ribbons, and their shadows lie across the cloud tops as long dark lines moving so gently he cannot quite catch them moving at all. He watches them the way one watches a fire in a hearth without needing to think, letting the largeness of the view do the small work of quieting him. Far below, 7 kites drift through the upper haze, their gossamer bodies stretched long and luminous against the ochre. From this height, they look like threads of light drawn slowly through amber cloth, each one following its own slow current, each one alone and unhurried. The platform beneath him hums, soft as a sleeping animal. His tether floats behind, a loose silver curve. There is nothing to attend to. There is only the giant and the rings and the kites. He drifts back to the console alcove. Moving the way one moves through deep water, without hurry, without weight. The screens wake at his approach in low, warm light, and he lets his hand rest a moment on the panel before he begins. He walks through the kite feeds one by one, greeting each under his breath. Halcyon first, whose wind ribbon lies soft and even across the graph. Then Ember, whose sail is drinking a slow, warm updraft along its lower edge. Zephyrin, Cloudfall, Marigold, Vesper, and last of all, Little Wren, drifting farthest out. Her readings arriving a heartbeat later than the others, patient as a distant bell. Wind ribbons unspool in gentle curves. Temperature traces bow and rise and settle. Pressure sighs against thin sail membranes and returns as numbers that move no faster than tide charts, no faster than the shadows of the rings across the cloud tops far below. Everything is nominal. Everything is calm. He murmurs each name again as he closes their pages, the way a shepherd might count a flock already asleep, not because he needs the count, but because the counting itself is a kind of tenderness, a quiet keeping of company across the long, amber evening. Between 2 feeds, he pauses. The position map has changed while he was not watching, and change on this platform is always a slow, quiet thing. His kites, which usually wander like leaves on a wide pond, are held in a slow, loose curve evenly spaced along an arc that follows one of the planet's inner ring gaps. He tilts his head, curious rather than alarmed, and lets the map turn under his gaze. It is a graceful shape, almost deliberate, as if some patient hand had passed through the upper haze and combed them into place, one after another, at intervals a careful weaver might choose. Halcyon at the near end, little wren at the far, and the others strung between them like beads on an invisible thread. He studies the arc for a long moment, tracing it with the tip of a finger just above the glass. It mirrors the ring gap almost exactly, as though the winds themselves had learned the geometry of the sky and offered it back to him. He smiles a small, private smile. The giant, it seems, has arranged his flock tonight and asks nothing of him but to notice. He calls up the wind logs and lets them unfold across the glass in soft, translucent layers, one season stacked upon the next, like pressed leaves. At first there is only the familiar weather, the swirls and eddies he has known for years, the little gusts that fret the kites into their usual wandering. But when he thins the surface noise and lets the deeper patterns settle, a shape emerges he has never quite seen before. A broad, slow current runs beneath the upper haze, parallel to the rings, so unhurried that it barely registers as movement at all. It has been there all along, he realizes, patient as groundwater, threading its quiet way across the amber face of the world. He follows its path with his eye and finds it drawn in the softest of blues, a lazy river of air whose banks are only the faintest change in pressure. He imagines it now as a long, invisible hand, passing again and again beneath the rings, tracing the same tender line into the sky. His kites, weightless and willing, have simply come to rest along the underside of that line, carried there over whole seasons by a touch too gentle to feel. He decides to leave them where they are. There is no rule anywhere in his manuals that says the kites must be scattered evenly across the upper haze, and the arc they have drawn gathers such a pleasing spread of readings that the Institute, when it next asks, will likely thank him for the accidental discipline of it. He opens the shift log and writes a small kind sentence, saying only that the drifters have settled into a natural alignment beneath the ridding gap and that he has chosen to let them rest. He signs his name in the soft way he always does, a single quiet mark at the end of the line, and closes the log. Then he returns to the window. From here, the kites are far too small to see, no more than motes on a face wider than any ocean he has ever known. Still, he pictures them. 7 quiet lights strung along the wind like beads on a slow necklace, breathing with the giant beneath them, keeping their patient watch. He rests his palm against the cool pane and lets his eyes soften and lets the amber world turn on without him. For a while, time passes in the easy way it does out here, unmeasured except by the small rituals he keeps for himself. He warms a meal in the little alcove behind the console, something soft and mild, and eats it standing, watching the amber curve of the world through the long window. He puts on a recording he loves, rain falling on broad leaves somewhere he has never been, a green place with a name he can barely pronounce, and the sound of it moves through the cabin like weather of its own. The platform hums beneath the rain, its low, steady note, and the two sounds fold together until he can no longer tell which is which. When he returns to the console, one of the kites has climbed a little higher than the others, lifted on some slow thermal breath rising from deeper in the haze. Its readings brighten with fresh detail, new numbers unfolding in gentle columns, and the arc he had admired is no longer quite perfect. Somehow that pleases him too, as if the shape itself were breathing, as if the sky beneath the rings had drawn in, softly, and were holding that breath for him. The platform turns as it always does, so slowly he does not feel it, and yet in time, the great amber curve begins to darken at one edge. He watches the change come on without hurry. The clouds that had been the color of honey deepen into bronze, and then into a dim, slow blue, as if the whole world beneath him, were being lowered into deeper water. The rings, which had been a pale suggestion by day, brightened against the darkening face. A long, thin lamp laid across the sky, softly luminous, keeping their own patient light. One by one, the kites cross into that dimness. He sees their little running lights wake as the sensors feel the fall of day, small green sparks kindling in sequence along the slow curve of their formation, 7 small lanterns lighting themselves without being asked. He thinks of small boats setting out across a quiet lake. At dusk, each one striking its lamp before pushing off from the reeds, and the thought settles warmly in his chest. He leans a little closer to the pane, resting his forehead against the cool glass, and watches them go, unhurried, into the gentle night of the world below. When at last he turns from the window, he lets the console know the shift is ending. His note is short, the way he prefers them. Kites nominal. Formation holding. Thermal lift observed at Station 4. Nothing more is needed. He signs it with his own quiet initials and lets the log close itself. The console dims at his word, its bright columns folding away one by one until only the softest indicators remain. Small, steady points like embers banked for the night. The cabin settles into a low blue hush, lit mostly by the rings themselves and by the deepening bronze of the world turning below. He drifts back to the window and lowers himself into the padded rest. The ringed giant fills the pane beneath him, calm as a sleeping animal, and the long, lit arc of the rings lies patient above. He closes his eyes to the low hum of the platform, that steady note he has grown so used to that it feels like his own breathing. Somewhere beneath him, 7 small kites ride a quiet wind in a shape no one asked them to make, and the tender falls gently asleep, content to be one more small thing carried along.